Welcome to the Empowering Consumers session. Great to see you all today. My name is Michael Jones, International Partnerships Manager at RAP, a climate action NGO, working internationally and very much a global food waste warrior. We heard today about the scale, the extent, the impact of food waste within our food system and environment. And according to the latest Refed data, households are by far, at 48%, the largest contributor to the food waste problem in the US. It's a complex issue. It's a behavioral issue. And this summit is all about solutions. Let's think how we can address this. Dana told us to think big, and we will do that today. We need to reshape the consumer environment to make it easy, accessible, convenient, cost-effective, and a default that we prevent food waste in the home. Today, we're going to be highlighting and talking to the business sector about their role in this challenge. Before I introduce our great set of panelists, there is just a few housekeeping points. So this session is going to be recorded, it's going to be live streamed, and will be available after the session today on the conference app and the Refed website. In terms of the Q&As today, we really welcome your questions. A microphone will be made available, and there is opportunity to ask a question via the app as well. We're going to have the conversation today, but it can always continue afterwards. So again, please use the app facilities to make that happen. Please can I ask that you mute any phones or devices for this session. And please use the opportunity to connect with the panelists today. There are some that are exhibiting in just over in the other room, and use the app facility as well. So many thanks for that. So let me introduce this panel to you. We have Emma Burns, Associate Brand Manager at Unilever. We have Mark Kammerer, Chief Commercial Officer at Transparent Path. We have Rachelle McCray, CEO, co-founder and co-inventor of Wisely Inc. And we have Harry Tannenbaum, co-founder and president of Mill. And to note, both Transparent Path and Wisely Inc. are Refed Catalytic Grant Fund grantees. Ooh. So I'm going to start with a few questions to the panel, and then we can throw that open to some questions later on. Fantastic. I'll start with you, Harry.
Let's go.
So, Mill, can you tell us about your solution that you've implemented?
Absolutely. I think first I just have to give a quick shout out to Refed, because without Refed there would be no Mill. You know, in the depths of the pandemic, when I was trying to figure out what to do next, I came upon Refed and started learning about the problem of food waste, and really this organization and the group here catalyzed our business. So it's a big deal to be here. I'm kind of starstruck. I'm also having to re-educate myself, because for the last 3 years I've started every conversation with, I'm working on food waste, it's a big problem. And you say that to people here, and it's like saying, I'm a person, I breathe oxygen. So at Mill, we're focused on the home to start, and we're building a new system to keep food out of the landfill, and also to help people figure out how to waste less food and understand just how much they're producing. And it starts with this new kind of bin that goes in your kitchen. There's one at a booth close by, and it's this magic thing, and you put all the food you don't eat into it, and it dehydrates it. And food is 80% water, so when we take the water out, it gets really small. And then we have a partnership with the US Postal Service. They'll come pick it up on your doorstep, get it back to us, and we get it to farms as an ingredient in animal feed. And the things that drive us And just for a little bit of background, I spent the last decade working at Nest, making thermostats. The end there was to work on climate change. So we've got a group of people from Nest and Tesla and Apple all coming together to work on the problem of food waste. And core to everything we do is how do you make it frictionless and delightful, and how do you also bring data to the front to help drive further behavior change? But yeah, we're building this new loop.
Fantastic. And just building on that, how does the solution integrate into lifestyle? How do you make that container work in the home and engage with households to make it happen?
I think with consumer behavior change, people are fundamentally lazy. Consumers are pretty recalcitrant, set in their ways. I think if we talk about waste, there's a lot of ritual in how waste is dealt with in the home. I think about my fiance Rachel's parents' house in Vancouver, and there's like this IKEA bag that hangs on a hook in the broom closet, and that's where the recycling goes. And I was like, when did the IKEA bag appear? And they were like, well, it just like showed up 15 years ago, and it's been there ever since. So these rituals sort of persist, and if we're going to change behavior, there can't be any learning curve. So you have to think about how you mimic things that people already know how to do. When we made the Nest thermostat, we made it round because people were used to round thermostats. And it turned just like normal thermostat. And you want to sort of meet people where they are, and if you find yourself forcing people to go through instruction manuals or lots of Googling or really any work at all, you're not going to have that behavior change because you have to make it really easy and a really easy on-ramp there.
Fantastic. Emma, can I come to you? A major food business, and how do you utilize your brands to really drive home the message of food waste prevention for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm not the man on the slide over there. We had a quick fill-in this morning, so thank you all for having me, and I'm very excited to be here. But yeah, I mean, obviously the name Hellmann's, or Best Foods if you're from the West Coast, is a very well-known household name. We're the #1 mayonnaise in the United States in 1 in every 2 households. So this gives us not only the opportunity, but also the responsibility to serve a purpose, right? We connect with so many people every day over great tasting food, and we're a great tasting product. So we've created the purpose of Make Taste Not Waste, where our main goal is every year to inspire over 100 million people globally to become aware of the problem of food waste, because that's really where it all starts. So many people don't recognize the problem of food waste. They don't realize how it contributes to the environment or even to their wallets in terms of how much money gets thrown out a year from food waste. So that's really the first step of what we do. We put every piece of our marketing campaigns from in-store to influencer to Super Bowl commercials. I heard there was a trivia question on that last night, so I hope some people got it right, towards getting out the message of the problem of food waste, make taste, not waste. And then from there, we've also created some actual tangible solutions to help people make action and change in their home, basically looking at the relationship people have with their food in their fridge. So I think we can all think of that moment where you open your fridge and you're like, ugh, I have nothing to eat, so I'm gonna order in food, or I'm gonna look up a recipe and buy a whole new set of ingredients. But it's all about making flexible recipes, which we call flexipes. And sometimes they use the use of Hellmann's, sometimes they don't. And getting creative with what you have and setting aside 1 night a week to do so has really proven to help reduce food waste.
Fantastic. And obviously being from the UK, I'm even aware of the power of the Super Bowl break, the prime time slot. Is that an indication of change, the fact that you're able to, the food waste awareness is an opportunity, is of significance, there is a growing awareness of the issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so the Super Bowl in the US is actually the 2nd largest food waste holiday after Thanksgiving, because you think of all those Super Bowl parties, all the food that gets made, and then just thrown out the next day. So it's a great moment for Hellmann's to step up and start the conversation for the largest advertising stage. It's over 113 million people tuning in a year. So over the 3 years that we've participated in Super Bowl, we've had over 22 billion impressions on people talking about food waste over the commercials themselves, earned social campaigns, et cetera, and that's generated an increase in food waste conversation by about 24%, so still a lot to go. I mean, I think there is an opportunity, there is a shift that we're seeing of people become more and more aware, but we just have to keep going because we're not quite at that moment yet.
Fantastic. And Rachelle, exciting times for Wisely. We expect the imminent arrival of a smart food storage container. Could you tell us a little bit more about it and what to expect?
Yeah, well, I swear both of you are like living inside of my brain, because one of the things that we talk about is that you open up your fridge and you're looking around and you're staring at the storage container that you have perfectly good food in, most likely, if it hasn't been shoved to the back and forgotten about. And you're kind of looking in there, and then you just either go somewhere else or you decide to eat out, and you just don't, there's no awareness. And so that was one of the things that Wisely's biggest goal is to tackle, is the awareness factor. Being aware of when something was put in the fridge, because we have had that moment. I just had it this last week. We made lasagna at my house, and I opened up the fridge and I thought, when did we make the lasagna? And I'm looking at my husband and he doesn't know, and my mom's staying with me right now and she doesn't know. But luckily I had Wisely to tell me, and what was interesting was I thought it had been in there longer than it had. So most likely I would have made the decision to throw it away, but because I had something with visibility on it to tell me, I actually made a smarter choice to eat the food. And so Wisely it's a smart food storage container we're getting ready to launch in January. And the idea is that we can make you aware of not only of what's going on inside the container, but also when you're not home, you can also see what's going on, because we do have an iOS app too.
Fantastic. So you've got some personal insight in terms of using the Wisely application. In terms of research of potential customers as part of your product development, could you just tell us a little bit more about some of the insights that you've got there?
Yeah, so Wisely is not only we're a most recent grantee for the Refed Catalytic Grant, but we're also an SBIR Phase 1 winner for the Environmental Protection Agency. So right now we are in the middle of a Phase 1 grant where we're doing some research and development on the product. And part of the research that we're doing is not only a user study about consumer change and behaviors, but also we did something through NSF I-Corps, National Science Foundation. And if you're not familiar with that, the I-Corps program sends companies through customer discovery. And what we do is, it's actually like a scientific method, so there's a standard. And the idea is that you go out to who you think that your customers might be for something that you're making. And you ask them unbiased questions, because you don't want to say, hey, do you think it'd be great to have something smart in your fridge? I mean, that's, totally leading. The idea is to ask you, what does a typical day in your house look like? What do you do with your leftovers? How often do you think you're throwing them away? What's your biggest frustration? And what happens is you take all of that data and you'll start to see a pattern. And that's what's very interesting, is Wisely found through customer discovery that people are very frustrated with the way that we store our food. Some things come down to features, right, of a specific storage container, what it's made out of, how it stacks, what it looks like. But most people are frustrated by the loss of time and money and the time they're spending going to the store. There's a lot of frustration around it. And so rather than build a product that people don't want, we decided to take all of that information and build a product that people will need and will use. And earlier you had mentioned that you made the nest round, because we are used to doing things that way, right? That's something that we did with Wisely, is we are not trying to completely change the behaviors of what we're doing in the kitchen. We're trying to take something that we are already using and have it do some of the work for you without completely changing the behavior as to how that we do it.
Okay. And over to you, Mark. Great. If that's okay. So, transparent path.
Yep.
Providing the data solutions, using information to really understand the supply chain and to provide that transparency. Can you tell me about your work in terms of engaging on consumer?
Sure. Yeah, I love an oversubscribed room. There are seats for people who are sitting on the floor if you want to scatter yourselves about. I'll take a moment for anybody who wants to find a seat. You can take my backpack off, Jeremy, and my phone and everything.
You can tell Mark works on optimization.
You can tell, yeah. There's seats. Please grab a seat. You're bugging me if you're standing in the back and you don't go to a seat. Please, please, please. Find one if you can. Thank you. Find one if you can. The hands are up showing where the seats are. This is the usher room. This is the usher moment in your talk. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So Transparent Path is a commercial-focused solution to try to interdict when something is going wrong in transit. So we use sensors through cell to be able to know where things are in real time. That's great. That's wonderful. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't solve the problem of what happens if something goes bad. And we started the company originally from an observation that, do you know where your stuff comes from? Provenance. Do you know where it comes from? How many of you could tell me where your food came from? When you open your fridge, where did it come from? Not the grocery store, where it came from. And so we got curious about what would you do with that information if you had it? Well, there wasn't a solution that we could find. And so what we did was we did 4 different research projects asking consumers, what would you like to know? How would you rank the order of doing something about it? And what form does it need to be delivered in? And as everybody on the panel is talking about, well, it better be pretty easy. It better be in one place, and it better be something I can believe. So we are also a catalytic grant awardee, and we're taking that notion, which we've built the prototypes for, and saying, now how do you make it real? How many of you have a great idea on how to solve food waste? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hands. Okay. How many of you have turned that into a prototype? Okay. So what happens along the way of wanting to do something when you're in a commercial venture and wanting to do something when you're trying to deal with consumers is you run out of time and money. Unless you give your money or your time, unless somebody gives it for free. We were lucky enough to have a CTO who's nuts and decided to take these 2 projects on, one to talk about freshness and one to talk about proof. And so that's where it started. Personally, Emma, I call it the mashup. I don't wait just to one day of the week. I'm in a household of 2, and when I look in the fridge every day, my wife says, "You're going to eat that, right?" And I say, "Sure. Why don't I make something right now?" And what I've learned, similar to what you're talking about, is unless you have some real understanding of the freshness of your food or where it came from or what you want to do with it, it'll sit in your fridge or it'll sit in your pantry or it will sit in your garbage. And so our whole thinking is that as we collect more of this information along the commercial side, how do you plug that in with various other data sources so you can make a better decision at your household level?
Fantastic. So the role of technology is absolutely critical in terms of your intervention. How do we make sure, or what's the insight in terms of consumers utilizing technology to make the most out of it?
Round knobs, right? Round knobs. If you think of that same idea, people have to trust the data sources. So they have to know that the standards that you're using and implementing are things they're already familiar with. So if I make up a new standard, Transparent Path standard X, Y, and Z, nobody's going to believe it. But if I use GS1, or I use USDA, or use agriculture, I use anything that has already got a stamp on it and bring that information in, which is what our intent is, you have some credibility. So you don't want to have to worry about gaining credibility. The second thing is it's got to make sense to them. So if I ask someone to open my app and they put it in front of a product and they have to take one more action, it's not going to happen. All the information has to be there in front of them, and it has to be relevant to the decision that they're making. So what we're working our way through is how do you get the right data streams pulled together and presented to somebody in their household? How do you use the standards that already exist across all of our food distribution systems, and then how do you use what we can collect off of our commercial side and combine that together into a solution?
So lots of thinking gone into the solutions here by the panel, all about ease, convenience, which is really great to understand and see. How do you, this is to all, how do you measure that impact? How do you understand what the responses are? How do we maintain that food waste behaviour does occur? I don't know whether anyone wants to go first.
I can.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell an interesting story from Nest about the thermostat. So we got to the point where we were in sort of tens of millions of households, and the level of kilowatt hour savings were on the order of 120 billion kilowatt hours saved, which is like enough to power the Earth for 5 days, which felt pretty good for a team of a few hundred. And there were two things that drove that savings number, and we could sort of tease that effect out. One was putting a thermostat on the wall. Programs itself, doesn't run AC when you're not at the house, saves you money, this is a practical thing, it's also cool, you brag about it at dinner parties, that kind of thing. The other impact, the other half of that impact came from sharing data with our customers. So we would send a monthly energy report to customers, and it might say something like, did you know that you're running your air conditioning 30% more than the average person in your neighborhood? And that, that friendly competition with neighbors drives further behavior change. So at Mill, the bin is connected to the internet. It has a scale in it. It tells you every day how much food you put into it. I was talking to Dr. Brian Rowe about a study that NRDC did the other day. It is a mean, but there was a question asked to Americans, do you think you waste more food, about the same amount of food, or less food than the average American? And 78% of people said they wasted less. I'm not sure if that's exactly how the distribution worked out. So there's something very real in the problem of food waste. We all know these numbers, 600 pounds per household per year. USDA estimates $2,000 of food wasted per household per year, but it's not really present. So I think when we think about technological intervention in the home, being able to surface data and say, did you know you put 44 pounds of food in a bin last month? That starts to bring things more front of mind, and things that aren't measured don't really move.
Totally agree. And just to add to that, that's where partners like Refed and like RAP are such a huge part of what we do and how we integrate it into our programs, because we can say, hey, did you know that you're wasting $1,500 a year on food that you're just throwing out? Like, think about what that could go towards. You could be, having a whole vacation for your family with that kind of money. And those are really motivating moments for people to start to make that change. And then just to add from like being part of such a large business, Unilever and Hellmann's, like, it's all about for us setting goals in terms of what that data should look like. So we set a goal every year of the amount of people that we need to reach and ensure that we're doing that with the programs and with the funding that we have. And then also utilizing the data that we get from our research programs for Fridge Night, our program that we have around Flexipes, and using up what you have on hand to, again, make goals and how many people that we're getting to interact with our program and download and such.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to your question because I'm trying to measure actions, right? Measuring actions is in an individual level. And will people report accurately on their actions? So I'm in a study right now, and one of the things I have to do is weigh myself every day. Okay, I have to weigh myself every day.
I'm preparing for a wedding, and I'm doing something similar.
So in order to take that action, I have to have a scale available to me, right in front of me every morning. If it's not in front of me every morning, I'm not going to take that action. So measuring actions and what you're talking about, how we tease out actions, Refed, and Refed is great at framing, but we have this interesting problem in America and all over the world with people having instant access to information that will dispute any information you give them. No matter what fact you say you have, somebody can find a counterfact. So unless we work on the change in the behavior that people see and then making it relevant to them. Like if you said, you could take a vacation if you didn't throw out so much food, you won't, I don't know how to make what I give people relevant. I know that I know that people will change their behavior if they're motivated by something. And I don't quite know what that something might be for every household.
So can I just pick up on that point around actions? And I was going to come to you, Rachelle, if that was okay. Mm-hmm. Where you've got an intervention such as a smart container, how does it influence other behaviours associated with food waste reduction beyond storage?
Yeah, so we are, again, trying to make people just more aware, but we go beyond that because one of the things in our user study, so to back up for just a second, one of the things that we are trying to do to influence behavior change is using 3 laws of behavior change. So sight, hearing, and also being able to touch. And so for Wisely, you have to rotate the disc, you hear something, and then you can see what's going on, whether it's on the disc itself or whether it's on the app. And so, not to use like a Pavlov's dog situation, but we're hoping that this repetitive nature becomes basically a habit. But it's not just about the habit of storing our food. We're already into that habit. We are hoping to go beyond that. And so something that interestingly just came up with a user is she does not like to eat her carrots out of a bag. She takes them out of the bag and she puts them in a storage container when she gets home. Well, she doesn't eat her carrots. She puts them in there, she forgets about them, they get shoved to the back of the fridge, whatever it might be, she's not eating the carrots. And so she has a Wisely, and she said, I figured out why I'm not eating my carrots. And I said, tell me. And she said, because I don't have hummus. And I forget that I don't have hummus because they're in the container. And she said, so every day when I got my reminder on my app that I still had carrots in my fridge, I remembered I need to go to the store and buy some hummus. The same conversation happened with someone different, a different user, a behavior that we changed a little bit, was that they make too much food. That was the realization that they made. They said, why is it that I do have lasagna? I put 4 containers of lasagna for my family of 4 in the fridge, and it was in there for, 11 days. And they're like, maybe we should just make less lasagna. And the interesting thing is that fact has probably been a part of this user's household this entire time, but you aren't aware of it. And so that's why I always go back to the awareness feature. And for every household, it's going to be a little bit different. But the behavior change that we're doing is hopefully not only storing the food, but it's how you're shopping, how you're spending your money, how you're spending your time in your kitchen, how you're utilizing recipes that come from other companies when you're trying to repurpose what's going on in your fridge. And so we try to go just beyond the idea that we're storing food in a container. We're trying to say, well, we can actually reshape a lot of our behaviors outside of the home as well that surround our food and the behaviors and habits that come with them.
You all have a wealth of insight and data behind the scenes and a real strategy of where to go next. And I was just really interested to know about how do we make food waste reduction in the home as inclusive as possible so that everyone can have an access and do their part. I just want to open floor here in terms of commenting on that.
I can go first. So yeah, I think it's going back to what we've kind of already talked about a little bit with just the innate nature of humans not really realizing they're the problem, right? We think food waste, and a lot of the time we think supply chain, we think restaurants, we think anywhere but us, really, because you're not aware of it. So I think it's just having that understanding, and then one thing that we try to do from a Hellman's perspective is approach it in a lighthearted and uplifting manner, right? Because it is kind of depressing, like if you think about it. It's not good for the environment, it's scary, you lose money, like it's not great, right? But if you approach it in an uplifting and exciting manner of like, oh, you can dedicate this one night a week where you and your kids get together and you make a really fun meal just with what you have on hand, that's fun and that's more enticing to people than getting depressed and scared and running away from the problem, which we tend to do.
I think I'll just share in terms of inclusion and access, I think this is where public-private partnership is really important. We've started as a direct-to-consumer business model, but a few weeks ago we announced a partnership with the city of Tacoma, Washington, where we're working with the city to get our service into more homes. And it's pretty cool. Tacoma is a city that's had curbside organics collection for close to 2 decades, but what they see is that it's hard to get participation numbers up to the maximal level. And when we look at diversion rates, source separating food scraps in your kitchen is tough. As a municipality, we can invest millions of dollars in infrastructure and routes and ways to move material, but if the right decision isn't made at the cutting board inside the home, the rest of that loop can't be closed. And it's really neat for a city like Tacoma that has deep expertise in organics. They have a pay-as-you-throw rate structure where the less you send to landfill, the less you pay on your monthly waste bill. And there's nice math that can be done there, which is, hey, if we can downsize your curbside landfill-bound cart by 50%, there's $40 of savings per month there. And that can more than fund the service that we provide. So thinking about ways that we can work with municipalities, we can work with cities to really open the door wide.
Rachelle, Mark, did you want to come into the conversation about inclusivity and beating the drum, keep it going?
Yeah, sure. So, in a different kind of mindset of inclusivity, we are looking into people that sometimes don't have the tools and resources that they need. So we're looking at working with like health insurance companies for people who have diabetes and need to manage their care that way with their food if they're on a special diet. Also, those with Alzheimer's disease, to be reminded, maybe they're either forgetting to eat, or maybe they are not, maybe they need to go to the store, maybe the food has spoiled. And so kind of shifting over into just a different category of inclusivity, and also making a product. We have our target demographic, of course. We're still a business at the end of the day. We still have the research that we've done, and we know who's going to buy our product, but also coming up with a solution that is affordable outside of the demographic that we have found for a tech product.
If you want to comment, yeah.
So inclusion, right? Everybody's included already. Everybody's part of the problem. Nobody in this room, or maybe very few in the room, are completely without wasting something. So I sort of I ask myself the question the opposite way: is how do I get people activated to take one action? How do I get them activated to just take one action? Is it information? Is it behavior? Is it modeling? Is it promoting other people's solutions? Public-private, absolutely, because things that can show up in a household all the time that are forced to show up, if your utility bill shows up all the time, if certain things come all the time, habitual notification, that's part of a broader information challenge that we're going to have. But I just want you to take one action. That's it. I don't ask you to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because like the scale, if it's not right in front of me, I won't do it. So think about around your communities. What's the one action you can ask somebody to take? One. And see how it works.
Fantastic. I've had the great opportunity to ask you a lot of questions to the panel. I was just hoping to kind of open that up. If anyone's got a question, we will have got a roving mic here. Fantastic. If you're asking a question, if you're able to stand up and give your name and organization and who your question is directed to.
Yeah. My name is Amar, and I'm from New York City. I'm a part of the Environmental Defense Fund Climate Corps program. And my question is to pretty much everyone. You've spoken about this in the inclusivity discussion, but I was wanting to ask how much of a barrier is pricing in terms of adoption of, because all of these are tech solutions, and are you guys looking at economies of scale and saying we want to eventually go towards lower pricing and hence more inclusivity? So just wanted to know more about that.
Yeah, this is a great question. we can think about different kinds of new technology that was introduced that allowed for systemic change. Solar panels, electric vehicles. If we look at the cost of the first Tesla Roadster, $250,000 car, and I think the brakes didn't even work. Naturally, there's a smaller segment of people that are immediately going to adopt that sort of bleeding edge tech. Or if we think about dollar per square inch energy conversion on the first solar panels versus where we are today. You need those early adopters to help prove that it can change behavior and work. And as you scale, costs do come down. So necessarily, in the journey of introducing new technology, there is going to be some economies of scale and cost that comes down. And it's important to sort of think about how we can make sure we're learning as much as we can in the early days to design for scale at later stages. But I think you're always, especially when you're building hardware, you're always in this battle of how many features can I get into this product? How good can I make this experience? I have an AirPod case in my pocket, and like the click-clack of the lid is very, very satisfying to me. And that click-clack comes with cost. It could be less clacky, but it would be less delightful. So we have to sort of think about these trade-offs, and that's what, in hardware land, we sort of bang our heads on the table. That said, with solar or electric vehicles, I think the thing that's so amazing about these kinds of technologies is they're actually more efficient. You end up with a more efficient use of resources, a more efficient system. And if we're going to decarbonize the economy, food system needs to decarbonize. And waste is a huge chunk of it, 10% of emissions globally. And I think the way we're going to get there is through more efficient systems that people adopt because it makes economic sense or it makes sense from a utility perspective. So definitely the cost curves need to make sense in the long run, or else we're not really going to be in tens of millions, hundreds of millions of households. The solutions we talk about will stay niche.
Be willing to stand up.
Hi, my name is Aurora. I do a lot of food waste work in hospitality, especially with events, and there's a lot of research that shows when people are on vacation or at events, they tend to abandon the ethics and values that they might have at home. So I'm just curious if any of your research has addressed people being sort of outside of the normal range of, hey, I can get you to care about this, and how we might apply that in hospitality and events.
Okay. I don't have direct research knowledge, but in my history, I worked in the cruise business. So everybody right now is thinking horrible amounts of waste, horrible amounts of buffets that went nowhere. But I will tell you that one of the primary things that we did in that environment was to start to change the behavior of the people on the ship. What's the number one thing that would change their behavior? Make a guess.
Seasickness.
Size of plate. There was so much food that was being wasted because we had the old style plates. So the VP of hotel operations and I got together and I said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I'm going to change the size, which meant changing the dishwashers, which meant changing, it was a capital project. So you want to go into how to change. It's really simple stuff. But it also may have an impact on someplace else in the systemic way that occurs. So just, to me, that was a real world example. 3 things happened. A lot less food got thrown out. We didn't make as much food, therefore we didn't have to stock as much food, therefore we didn't have to store as much food. If you've ever been on a ship, it's insane, how everything works. We didn't have to raise prices on things because we were saving money on food. And I don't think there's a simple answer for that. I think it's probably going to have to come in combination with what a provider chooses to do to interdict in some behavior.
I have one really small hopeful anecdote on that, where I do think changes in behavior at home can ring out externally. We had a customer let us know that they had a mill bin at home, and they lived in an area where there wasn't composting available, and they ate out at a restaurant and brought a fish carcass home from the restaurant to deposit into their bin. So that was kind of cool to see, just like once you get kind of hooked on a new way of doing things, it can change. But I definitely think there's probably deltas. You're probably not bringing it on an airplane.
Carol Jones from the Environmental Law Institute. I'm really interested in the mill product. You only talked about what happens in the household. And so you're building in transportation costs and, where does the processing happen? And so have you done a net greenhouse gas analysis of that? And do you see it just as a transition until we have curbside? Or do you see this as playing a role when households do get curbside collection?
Great question. You can we published a scoping life cycle analysis at mill.com/LCA, and we looked at each step of the chain. So the production of the bin, the energy the bin uses to dehydrate food, the transportation cost, which is actually kind of de minimis because we use USPS to move the material around, and it turns out the Postal Service is on the road already and at most addresses and generally has empty trucks going back to depot. And then the processing, what we discovered in this journey is that when you dehydrate food, it gets very small. Most pieces particles smaller than 3 millimeters. So the processing that we do, we pasteurize the material in the bin in the home, but we hit it again at a centralized facility. Our first facility is in Mukilteo, Washington, and then that moves to become an ingredient in feed. On a per household per year basis, use of mill all in saves about 0.5 ton of emissions per household. So where does the product end up? Chickens eat it, and eggs are made. And thinking about that as a circular loop, if you think about the EPA hierarchy of the highest and best uses, the very best thing to do would be to have people waste less food in the first place. And discussed yesterday, a 5 to 10% reduction in source generation of food scraps would more than double our LCA. So that's where measurement and feeding data back to individuals and meeting them where they are. This isn't just about landfill diversion. It also has to be about behavior change with purchasing. But just the diversion piece and keeping the food in the food system checks out. To start, not incredibly localized, but as we scale, it'll get more localized.
We have a few more hands up. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to announce that Ben Crook has arrived in the back of the room.
Ben is in the building.
Thank you for coming.
Welcome.
Hi.
Oh,
Rachel Searchin, Sustainability Analyst with Kroger. Just a question. There are so many different value propositions we can make when we're appealing to customers, consumers, to waste less food, money, climate. How do you choose which one of those values to speak to? How do you tailor that narrative?
For us at Wisely, we've worked our value proposition based off of the specific customer discovery that we did. So it's a really good point because, I did a behavioral center design class for a couple days with Rare. And one of the interesting thing about that was that we found from being from all different sectors during this course over a couple days was there are so many things to change when it comes to even just for the storage container, even just for Wisely. I mean, there are so many value props in one product. And so I think what we do is we focus on what the customers are saying and what their frustration is, because if we can target that frustration, then hopefully what we're ending up with is this less waste or less something or more money saved or more time. Again, they feel good about what they're doing, but for us, it's targeted customer discovery.
Emily?
Just to add to that, so with our program last year, it was launched last year, Fridge Night, and it's available as an app and an ebook. And it's quite difficult to get people to download an app about food waste when you're just saying food waste is bad, it's bad for the environment. So we did several tests in terms of what was most effective in driving downloads and interactions, and that's where we really found those value propositions around the amount of money that you're losing on food waste, the amount of time, that are a little bit more human-centric. It feels a little like it's more tangible to you. You can actually solve that, whereas when you're talking about a bigger problem like carbon offsets or just the environment in general, people are like it's like the term recycling. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like, oh yeah, we should do that, but it's not as motivating.
Okay. Question at the back and then one at the front.
Sure. My name is Dave Laskarzuski from Uproot, Colorado. Harry, I think you alluded to this a little bit with the data you said is on the website. Do any of you have any current research projects or recent research projects about human behavior that you'd be willing to open source? Thank you.
So who wants to go first?
I'm
Rachelle?
Our user study actually starts this week about the behavior of food storage habits, and I'd be happy to share it when we're finished in a couple weeks. So I can speak to older ones, but we have one that's actually going to be happening. It starts on Friday. So if you want to connect with me, I'd be happy to share that afterwards. But it's specifically about how people store their food. So if you're looking for a different type of study, some of these guys might be better to help.
Yeah, so we partnered with BeWorks for our study. It was the largest scale food waste study done in the US and Canada across 2,000 families, and we recently published that data, and it just looks at how we challenged all these families over a either 3-week or 5-week period to dedicate one night to being their fridge night and use up what they had on hand using the help of our Hellmann's Flexipes. So we have data about how that actually helped reduce food waste by 46% for those who participated, and also made them more confident in the kitchen. 88% said they were more confident. So it's really strong and effective data to see just how that one small moment can make a big difference. So happy to share that out as well.
Right.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Riley from the Carbon Crew Project, and what we do is work with householders, so it's so nice to hear you all talking about applications for households. But I want to share with you and then make a request. I carry with me at all times, in case I'm in a restaurant, this little pop-up silicone container that I put my leftover food in. And anywhere I go and people see me doing this, they go, oh man, I should really be having one of those with me. But it would be really cool if Wisely made a product that was maybe specifically, I love a little purse handles on yours, right?
Okay.
And so
Customer discovery right here.
I'm going to give them to everyone for Christmas gifts this
Perfect.
year. Thank you
Well,
very much.
I will take note. Thank you.
Fantastic. We are closely coming up to the end of time. Is there any more questions from the floor? One over there.
Hi there. I know some of you already. My name is Nikki Zoli. I'm with Lidl US. It's a German grocer, discount grocer that started here a few years ago, westward expansion. And looking at their strategy, food waste is one of our most critical areas. We have customers that cannot afford as much as maybe another grocer, and so every penny counts. So I'm listening to you very carefully when you're talking about the value of talking about saving money, saving time. And I'm just trying to understand, I'm looking at grocery in general, and I know I have some of our colleagues here, and how we can play a role in this space. Because it all starts with them getting out that grocery cart and shopping through the store, and we have a finite amount of time, but it's a really important stage for us. But it's different in some grocery stores versus another in terms of how much we can assist, how much we can invest. The second part I'd say of that is we're all donating to these big food bank networks like Feeding America, and then that food is going out to people, and I'm thinking, this is more of a thought, that there's an opportunity to work with them to hand, maybe collectively as an industry, some of these food waste tips that are motivating and educational through that food distribution channel. Yeah. But just would like to hear your thoughts, because I'm really quite keen on the grocery part.
That's great. So I want to go back to I'll try to address this. So how do people know that what they're buying they're going to use? How do people know? Some people make a list. Some people have recipes. Some people have an idea in their head. Some people have no idea at all. So the question is more, how do you change the behavior as they're purchasing, so they're buying the things that fit their needs. They're also, in our research, we think about two things. We think about proof So people being able to know something. And the other word that has come out of our research is fresh. Is it still fresh? Can I eat it? Can I consume it? Can I put it in with something else? So wherever you are in the grocery level, you have the issue that you have no control over what people buy. You can control them by price, you can control them by promotion, since I spent a little time around the grocery business, but you can't control what they buy. You can maybe control what you sell, so you make sure you sell things like we've heard about that are close dated, right? And so you can get them into the hands of people who are comfortable with food at that level. So I'd start with, and then on the food banking side and all the rest of it, I'm happy to talk to you about that separately. There's a whole, that world is complicated and maybe there's room for improvement. But I go back to what these guys are doing. They're making it fun. They're making it easy. They're making it something that you might want to do versus you don't want to do. Like if you tell me you must eat your leftovers, Mark, what's going to happen is I might put them in the trash. But if you tell me, make a mashup for me, and I share it with my wife, she's known as the guppy. So I have the main meal, and then she gets her guppy bite. And so she asked me, am I going to get a guppy bite this morning? Well, that's motivating to me to make a mashup. So there's something in making your mind, the minds of people who you're doing business with, think differently and have fun with it.
If I could ask one final question, if that's okay, just to kind of wrap this up. So Dana was talking, obviously, think big, but she was also talking about collaboration. And I just wanted to kind of end on that kind of question. In terms of addressing household food waste, just really keen to get the thoughts from the panelists about the collaboration with partners. How important is it from the private and public sector to really make a difference and see a shift in that dial? Open question to the panelists.
So back to the question that you just asked about the grocery stores, we've looked at ideas of, and also accessibility. One of the things is you don't have to necessarily buy our product, right, to get the information. We want to become an information hub. So that if you scan a QR code or you go online to our website, maybe there's a blog, maybe we have something from Mill or from Hellman's or from Transparent Path, and we work with collaborators to help them find other ways to reduce waste, or in the store making it more present, like just having, a little label that says, because you don't want to discourage them from buying something, but, did you get the hummus? Or like adding ways, or can you make, here's an idea you can make with carrots. Do you have this in your fridge? Like even from a grocery store level, remind people that there is stuff at home, because we do forget, sometimes we're on autopilot. At least I know, I can get done with work and I just go to the store and I'm just grabbing what I know, and half the time, again, if it's already in my fridge, I've now doubled. And what happens? The other stuff doesn't get used, right? So even reminders that are forward-facing and present to give them ideas, right, and be present. But I think the biggest thing with collaboration is there are so many wonderful people in this room, at this conference, on this panel. And the thing that I have personally found as not only a founder, but as a consumer too, because we're all consumers at the end of the day, although we all work in food waste, we all have the same problem that the rest of the world has because we're consuming it just the same. But I have found that I get the best ideas and I make the biggest impact when I'm working with other people, whether it's a local university, whether it's a local food bank. If there's a way that we can incorporate wisely, to distribute with the food bank so that people have that, working with companies like Refed, finding grants that are available to make certain things accessible. Things don't necessarily have to cost us all money in order to make more awareness. But like I said at the beginning when we started this, that's always been Wisely's at the very forefront, is just awareness. And awareness can be anything from a blog post to a social media post to an app to a trash can that helps you compost, whatever it might be. There are so many ways that we can do it. And the thing is, not one company can do it by themselves. We all have to do it together because it's such a global problem. And I think that, find someone and connect with them and find out how your company can potentially collaborate. Because maybe you work in the grocery store and maybe Wisely can say, hey, let's feature you on the website because you have great coupons this week or something. I don't know, but there's plenty of ways to do things that doesn't even have to cost anyone anything, and we're all still getting to the root of the problem, which is trying to solve this problem of wasted food.
Fantastic. We nearly need to wrap up. Anyone just want to come in finally on that?
I'll just say, Refed does such a great job of calling out that the residential stage and consumers represent close to half of the food waste in aggregate, both surplus food and food that ends up in landfills. And I think when we think about behavior change in the home, we shouldn't think of it as being just limited to the home. If we can change purchasing behavior, if we think about sort of the bullwhip effect that runs up the supply chain, focusing our efforts on consumer behavior will have co-benefits up and down the supply chain. And really, at the core of this is generating data that is actionable for people in their homes such that they can make the right decisions. And there is a question about what data is surfaced, and I think it is going to be different. For someone, it's going to be kilograms of emissions avoided. For someone else, they're going to say, what's a ton of CO2? Talk to me in extra meals or additional dollars saved. And so it's data, and then it's also an interface. And if we think about how we could collaborate with grocery or farm or NGO, it's thinking about how we can bring the information and insights from all these sources to the consumer. And we've seen that be really powerful in the past. Utility companies couldn't get their constituents to open an email, but people would read an email from Nest. Or we could surface local relevant information in an app that people were checking. So I think the consumer side, we're going to work to change behavior in the home. I think there are co-benefits, but I think there's something really good about an interface that we can create to have the right conversations.
Don't get discouraged if it doesn't work the first time. Collaboration takes time and effort. Don't get discouraged.
If I could just add one really quick thing, I know we're at time, but there's also the federal and actual policy change side to consumer behavior, and we've been working with Harvard Policy Law Clinic on the food date labeling bill. So I think that's a big partnership and opportunity for everyone to sponsor that as well, because that is another piece of behavior change, just not understanding what best buy versus don't use buy, et cetera, means, and creating clarity there, both from a manufacturer perspective and then for consumers to be able to understand it. So.
Thank you. And thank you to all the panelists for today for sharing their latest and greatest.